Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I will be talking about my favorite albums of all time. This year, I finally made updated videos on my favorite books, TV shows, and movies of all time, which I'll link down below. But doing those videos made me think about the fact that I've never talked about my favorite music albums. I've occasionally talked about music on my channel. I've done currently listening videos where I talked about music and podcasts that I was listening to at the moment. I haven't done one in forever because honestly I haven't really been listening to anything new. I will link a playlist for those videos down below if you're curious. But other than that, I've never really talked about my favorite music and music that I love. And because I did updated lists on my favorite books, TV shows, and movies, I just thought to complete all of it, I would talk about my favorite albums. Music and movies are the two things that I find very difficult to talk about just because so many people are very passionate about both of those things. I don't think that I have the best music taste. I kind of like what I like and that's it. I do branch out to different genres, different artists and stuff, but I kind of like the same thing. You'll see a theme in my favorite albums, how it's a lot of the same artists and a lot of the same sounds. This is just my music taste. I don't think that I have superior taste whatsoever. I just like these songs and these artists and these albums and they mean a lot to me. In general, I just feel like music and movies, people have very pretentious opinions about. And to me, it's just music. Everybody has different tastes and everybody likes different stuff. So this is my list of my top 10 favorite albums of all time. Coming in at number 10 is Calm by 5 Seconds of Summer. This album came out in March of 2020. I was really torn between this album and Youngblood. Youngblood was the first album that I discovered and fell in love with 5 Seconds of Summer. I mean, I knew of them before their album Youngblood, but I really fell in love with their music with Youngblood. I decided I like this album more. I think I like the lyrics a lot more and just the overall sound. It sounds a lot more mature and older and just kind of like their sound. You can really see their growth as musicians, but also as people. A lot of the songs on their album are very catchy and they have definitely gotten stuck in my head a few times. I also love albums and music in general that just plays heavy with instruments. And I feel like this album specifically is a lot of like electric guitar and I don't know, I feel like I don't really know instruments that well, to be honest. I'm not really gonna say what else, but obviously they're very heavy on drums, which I love. Just a very, very strong album and I genuinely love it and I re-listen to it all the time. My favorite songs on the album are probably Red Desert, Easier Teeth, and Not in the Same Way, but I also still love Thin White Lies and Lonely Hearts. Coming in at number 9, we have Wiped Out by The Neighborhood. This came out back in October of 2015. This is actually a recent favorite. I have always loved The Neighborhood. I really love their music, but I never really grew to love their other albums. I have another favorite album of theirs, which I will talk about later, but Wiped Out is a recent new favorite. I have been listening to it a lot recently and I have realized how much I love it. I'm usually like a lyric person, but I also can appreciate sounds without the lyrics. And I feel like that's with this album. I think I love more the sound and the whole vibe of the album more than the actual lyrics and the meanings of the songs. I think what's interesting about The Neighborhood is I don't always understand what their songs are about. And I feel like each time I listen to a song, I come up with like a different meaning or I pick up on something that I hadn't noticed before. This album is obviously full of traditional instruments, but there is so many different effects and noises that just make it so unique. This album to me screams California. It automatically makes me think of California and just the whole vibes. My favorite songs on the album are Wiped Out, The Beach, and Greetings from California. Those are like my top 3. Coming in at number 8, we have Harry Styles by Harry Styles. This album came out back in May of 2017. Oddly enough, I was never a One Direction fan. I never got into their music. I never got into the hype of One Direction. And when Harry released his first album, I was very hesitant, but I was excited and I immediately fell in love with it. The lyrics in this album, beautiful, wonderful. Just the overall feeling and aesthetic of this album. It has kind of this old sound, but modernized. I'm really struggling to describe albums. And there's a reason why I put this video off for so long, because I just feel like I can't describe music whatsoever. This is also another album that makes me think of a place. It makes me think of New York. I mean, obviously there is the song Ever Since New York, so it makes sense. Or what I think New York would be like. The nightlife, the sad, lonely days in this big city. I mean, I've never been to New York, but you know, that's the kind of vibe that I feel from this album. My favorite songs off this album are Only Angel, Kiwi, Woman, and From the Dining Table. Coming in at number 7 is Cherry Blossom by The Vamps. This album came out in October of 2020. This is actually the first and only album I've ever listened to by The Vamps, and I love it so much. It is such a fun, upbeat, entertaining album. I honestly don't really know much about The Vamps and their music and like their band, so I'm kind of reading some of the information about it right now actually, and it says all songs were completely written by them, which is a first for the band. I did not know that. I love the lyrics on this album. I think they're fantastic. They have some very catchy and deep lyrics. This album obviously has a lot of drums and guitar, but it also has a very electric pop sound. My favorite song off of this album is for sure Would You. There is something so interesting and addicting about this song. I absolutely love it. I would honestly consider it one of my favorite songs of all time. It's just very pleasing to listen to. But I also really loved Chemicals and Married in Vegas. I think those would be my top. Maybe Bitter. I also really like Bitter. Coming in at number 6 is Ceremonials by Florence and the Machine. This album came out in October 2011. This is such a classic album for me. It came out so long ago and it's still one of my favorite albums. This particular album is probably the most unique album I've ever listened to. There are so many interesting, weird, and different sounds. When it comes to Florence and her songwriting, I feel like sometimes her lyrics are so deep that I don't understand them, which, you know, maybe is a bad thing, but I feel like it works. I feel like I can always listen to this album and pick up on something new every single time. Parts of this album make me feel like I'm going to this very spooky but beautiful church, cathedral. And then there are other parts of this album that make me think that I'm taking like a night walk in a cemetery, or that I could perform like some kind of seance or something. This album has just so many different interesting vibes and I absolutely love it. I genuinely love so many songs on this album. The opening one is fantastic, Only for a Night, What the Water Gave Me, Lover to Lover, No Light, No Light, Seven Devils, Leave My Body. This is just a phenomenal album and I will forever love it. Coming in at number 5, we have Born to Die, the Paradise Edition by Lana Del Rey. This came out in November of 2012. I feel like I'm kind of cheating with this one because it's sort of like 2 albums. I mean, she did re-release it with more songs, so I guess you can consider it one album, but I consider it kind of 2 because I did listen to Born to Die first and then the Paradise Edition when it came out. Lana Del Rey is my favorite artist of all time. She has genuinely transformed my music taste. Born to Die and Paradise both kind of have different sounds. I would say like the Paradise part is a lot darker. It's kind of richer in sound, if that makes any sense. Whereas Born to Die, I feel like is a little bit more upbeat and just a little bit more fun with still kind of some heavy intense, toxic lyrics. I'm never going to get sick of this album. I don't think I'm ever going to get sick of any of Lana's music. She just has a way of creating a song that is timeless. Sometimes her lyrics are very straightforward, but sometimes they have like a deeper meaning that you don't really understand, and you have to continue to listen to all of her songs to really understand everything. I love how she always ties her music with other things in her life and things that she loves and things that she's inspired by. I don't know, I just love her lyrics and her sound, and I love her evolution as an artist as well. That is one of my favorite things. You listen to this album and then you listen to Blue Bannisters and you have very different sounds, but the core is still very similar. I could say so much about this album, but I just love it so much. Obviously, I love Born to Die, Off to the Races, Blue Jeans. Off to the Races, an iconic song. National Anthem I also love. Do love Carmen. Ride, American, and Cola are probably my favorite off of the like Paradise half. Coming in at number 4, we have I Love You by The Neighborhood. This album came out in April 2013. This is my favorite album by The Neighborhood, obviously. I love when there's songs that sound kind of muffled or that they're not close up to the microphone and they kind of sound like they're in a different room or that there's like a voice effect. I love that. I don't know why. I think it just sounds very interesting. There's something so addicting about the sound of this album. I think it's just all the different effects and like weird sounds. It's kind of very atmospheric and moody and a little dark. The Neighborhood is one of the first bands that I ever fell in love with music-wise, and I continue to listen to this album to this day. My favorite songs are Everybody's Watching Me, What Do You Want From Me, Female Robbery. Those are my top 3. I also do want to say a bonus for A Little Death, which is one of their singles that they released, and then Baby Came Home. I love those 2 bonus songs. I wish it would have been included on their actual full-length album, but they were just released as EPs and like a single. But Baby Came Home and A Little Death are just phenomenal, and I feel like they should have went with that album. Coming in at number 3 is 3 by Banks. This album came out in July of 2019. This album is almost indescribable. It's nothing like I've ever heard before. And initially when I heard this album, there were definitely songs on here that I was like, oh, I don't like that. But the more I listened to it, the more I was like, oh my God, this is so insane. Banks loves putting different sounds and she loves using autotune and she's not afraid to use it, which I think so many people hate that, and I get it, but she makes it into an art. This is just the most special album that I've ever listened to. I've never heard anything else like it. My favorite songs off of this album are definitely Contaminated, Stroke, Propaganda. I also really like Till Now and Look What You're Doing to Me. Look What You're Doing to Me is a song you will have to get used to. It took me at least like 5 listens to, and then I fell in love with it. I think it's the most bizarre but cool song. After you listen to it multiple times, you realize how much it works. Coming in at number 2 is The Altar by Banks. This came out in September 2016. If you've been following my channel for a long time, you would know that this is an album that I never really listened to. I loved Banks' first album, and then I immediately skipped to her third album when it came out. I totally skipped the second album. I, for some reason, thought I didn't like it because I'd listened to it maybe once or twice when it came out. I would say like maybe a year or 2 ago, I kind of rediscovered it and I started listening to it and I fell in love. And I love this album more than her first album, which I thought her first and third album were my favorites, but this one beat her first album. I feel like to really appreciate Banks, you need to listen to all of her music in order. You need to listen to her first album, Goddess, then this album, and then her third album, because they genuinely evolve with her. Her sound evolves, her lyrics evolve, and you can already see the evolution in her music with the second album. The sound is different, the lyrics are different. This album just has a lot of different elements. It's just such a atmospheric mood. My favorite songs off this album are Gemini Feed, Lovesick, Mind Games, Trainwreck, Weaker Girl. Beautiful lyrics. Love that song. But then I also love Poltergeist. And then To the Hilt. And 27 Hours. Judas, love this album. It is just iconic and amazing. And if you haven't listened to Banks, you need to. Sorry if my voice sounds a little off. I have been talking for way too long and I'm starting to lose my voice. But we are finally down to my favorite album of all time. This is number 1. Coming in at number 1 is Ultraviolence by Lana Del Rey. This album came out in June of 2014. This is an album that I genuinely feel like no words can describe it. It's dark, it's heavy, but it's full of life. When you look at the album cover, it's white and black. That is how the album feels. It's heavy on guitar, electric guitar, and drums, which I'm absolutely obsessed with. I love that this is the direction that Lana went into after her first 2 albums. It was kind of a completely different sound, but it still was very Lana. Again, she has this old, very nostalgic sound. Each song kind of has a different vibe, but ultimately they flow all very nicely and just make a perfect album. This is just an album to me that makes me feel grateful to be alive. I know that seems very dramatic, but whenever I listen to this album, it makes me feel like I love life and I love everything, but it also makes me sad at the same time. I absolutely love it, and I honestly listen to it probably like once a month. It is truly an album that has changed me and shaped me as a person. This album came out when I was graduating high school, so I was going through a lot of life changes, and this album was with me through all of that. My favorite songs on this album are Ultraviolence, Shades of Cool. Shades of Cool, I love everything about it. The lyrics, and then the little like music solo that happens towards the end, wonderful. Brooklyn Baby, West Coast. West Coast is like the best thing you will ever hear. Like, there is something so soothing and just pleasing about the song. I absolutely love it. Pretty When You Cry, I adore, even though it's a very sad song. I think I love it because it was freestyled and done in like one take, and I think that's insane. Old Money is one of my favorite Lana songs. It is just nostalgic and beautiful and heartwarming, but also heartbreaking. I love that song. And then I also really love Black Beauty. If you've never listened to Lana or you're kind of on the fence about her music, I highly recommend checking out this album because it is truly one of a kind. And in my opinion, the best album of all time. So those are my top 10 favorite albums of all time. Let me know if you have listened to any of these albums, any of these artists. Let me know what you think about them, and let me know what your favorite albums of all time are. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to give this video a like, subscribe, follow me on all my other social media, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.